Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Allincrypto podcast. I am your host, Allincrypto, and today I am very excited to be introducing my next guest. We have Ziga Drev, the co-founder and managing director of Trace Labs, which is the company that are the core developers behind OriginTrails. So welcome on board, Ziga. It is a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, the pleasure is all mine. And I said to you briefly off camera that the last time I came across a project and got as excited as I did with looking at OriginTrails recently was Chainlink back in 2018 with this idea of being able to verify data and have it work as an Oracle price feed. And I think you guys, for me, are largely the evolution of that. So very, very excited to have you on. And with all my guests, I really like to start with them. So if you could perhaps give yourself a little bit of an introduction and how you got into the distributed ledger technology space, that would be brilliant.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. I'm Ziga, one of the founders of OriginTrail, and also co-founder of Trace Labs, which is the core development company of OriginTrail ecosystem, essentially. I got into the distributed ledger world very much gradually. Some 10 years and even more so ago, myself and two of my co-founders wanted to kind of solve a problem of transparency issue in supply chains. And back then, we kind of saw this problem prevailing within the food supply chains, whereby honest producers of very quality organic products had very difficult time distinguishing their products from cheap imports. So 12 years ago or so, we developed a very rudimentary system that allowed producers of organic quality food to convey more information to consumers, and in that way kind of differentiate their product offering from cheap imports. And then over a course of a few years, we also managed to establish a company. We got a few clients. And this is when the first centralized solution was born, a scalable solution. We were able to sell it across the food industry. And that solution essentially acted as a broker of information between producers of food or just about any item in supply chains and consumers, which were able to verify and check information and quality parameters of products that they were buying in stores. Back then, that was around 2016, 2015. We got a lot of questions as to how, as consumers, how as partners in supply chains can trust information they receive about products they were buying, about products they were handling. And this is when we started to discover this very cool technology of blockchain, which we also immediately discovered was not immediately applicable to the problem that we faced in supply chains for several reasons. A couple of them being definitely cost issues, and we're talking about permissionless blockchains, not some hyperledgers or private variants. So cost was definitely a prohibitive factor, and secondly, blockchains do not possess database features that you would need to describe the reality around us, so to act as a trusted knowledge foundation for the real world. And in 2016-17, after conducting few experiments with blockchain technology, initially Ethereum, we saw that we need to build an additional layer between blockchains and applications within the enterprise sector. Because of our past experience before that, we saw that there are two components to the technology that were very handy and useful to tackle such a challenge. One such component is called knowledge graph. Knowledge graph technology is being used by companies such as Google, Amazon, essentially the biggest companies, most important companies, to organize information and make it discoverable. Now, just this centralized knowledge graphs currently being used by Google, bigger companies, of course, are meant to somehow appropriate data. And the problem still is that using knowledge graph as a centralized database, you still cannot prove whether or not this data has integrity. So we still kind of lean back on the blockchain, and we decided to merge both technologies. So we overlaid knowledge graph first off kind of theoretically over blockchain, and we devised a so-called decentralized knowledge graph. And the decentralized knowledge graph was then first described in a white paper, end of 2017. We even did a test integration with one of the retailers in Asia, in Shanghai. And that also got us into Walmart Food Safety Innovation Pipeline as the only non-Chinese company, which also kind of gave us a lot of, I would say, confidence also to establish an office in Hong Kong. Soon after successfully also completing an ICO based on the white paper that people found very compelling, we launched the first network in 2018. So the first network was born, the first really decentralized knowledge graph, which also soon after was applied to many sectors within supply chains, from food supply chains to railway sector to assurance and compliance. And nowadays, we're predominantly seeing that decentralized knowledge graph can also bring confidence into artificial intelligence, simply because artificial intelligence is becoming one of the biggest bullshit generators. It used to be us, humans, but now machines are becoming far more capable even at producing misinformation. And this is where we find ourselves now, and this is where OriginTrail, we feel, can really provide this leapfrog solution towards really brokering trust, not just in supply chains, but in any aspect of human life.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. And I want to kind of unpack a lot of that and maybe just start off by talking about what a knowledge graph is. So, and this is why we love having people like yourself on, because it became very apparent to me that with the use of a distributed ledger technology, you can fundamentally change many of the systems that we have today. So Bitcoin spawned this, of course, with money. You know, it looked to tackle the problem of centralized banking and all the kind of issues that surround that. And a distributed ledger was perfect for that. And Hal Finney himself, somebody who many people believe was Satoshi, I'm not quite convinced, but he said that actually there are many applications to a global distributed ledger. And this is what really excites me about OriginTrails, because you guys are applying a distributed ledger technology to a knowledge graph that fundamentally changes the game from a number of different perspectives. So could we maybe sort of unpack what a knowledge graph actually is, perhaps in the centralized version as Google use it, and then we will add on where the implementation of a decentralized knowledge graph takes us? You know, what are the pros and cons? So if we could just maybe unpack what a knowledge graph is at maybe a basic level, and then we can sort of go into a little bit more detail on it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, knowledge graph in essence could be considered as one form of a database. We would say that this is a far more advanced database than, say, relational database, because you can establish connections between data points and organize data in much more performant way than just using standard relational database. It's definitely a more complex database, but because of the properties of being able to link data, to link knowledge, to link information within the database itself, you can organize information in far more granular way. And that's the reason why knowledge graphs are being used much more than the standard relational database within the internet technology by giants such as Google, Microsoft, Facebook, essentially to organize information about yourself, organize information about products and services they sell, so that they can be much more effective and efficient at targeting and amping up their business models. So in a nutshell, knowledge graph can be considered as a very, very performant database. Now, the problem with centralized knowledge graphs, at least the way we see it, is
Ziga, just to break that down a little bit more, sorry to interrupt you there, because I can't wait to get into what you're about to now get into in regards to the problems with centralization in regards to a knowledge graph. But I don't think any of us are under any illusion that when we use applications like Google, Facebook, YouTube, which this is going to be airing on, we get targeted information specifically to us or our devices, basically, that we're the users of. And that's made capable through a knowledge graph. Because if you just have a database, you know, it's a lot more hard to, what would the word be? Sort of pinpoint who's watching what. You know, you've just got all this data and it's not really compiled. But whereas a knowledge graph links things together so that it can target an audience a lot better. So is a knowledge graph, and of course we know there's the implementation of algorithms, is a knowledge graph a key feature with some of these sort of tech giants in regards to knowing how to show you certain content, for example?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, thanks to the knowledge graph, we also, you know, got tech giants such as Google. Google uses knowledge graph, and I believe Google pretty much is the pioneer of knowledge graphs, at least in a sense of, you know, really monetizing this technology of being able to produce page rank so that you're able to see, you know, which pages are popular. And in that way, you as also participant in the internet can also somehow exploit the page rank to make your page more popular if you have more other websites linked to your website. So traditional, let's say, centralized tech giants are really using this technology very much to their benefits. Essentially what we wanted to do is provide a variant that is also going to be tailored for, you know, the Web3 purposes and some of the principles that we hold near and dear within the Web3 ecosystem, which is democratizing data access and also allowing people to more equitably share value when it comes to information, knowledge creation. And I think this problem, so within the Web3 space, we oftentimes talk about transactions. We talk about, you know, how Bitcoin is a store of value, how Bitcoin is the new gold, which it is. It is an asset class. But I think what we are trying to shed more lights on within the Web3 space is how can knowledge become a new asset class? And knowledge can become a new asset class if you're combining both aspects. So knowledge graphs to capture information, essentially structure information into an actionable knowledge, and at the same time provide blockchain as an underpinning that is driving kind of a consensus when it comes to the ownership of data, also transferability of data, and also being able to do so in a scalable manner. And this is where also some of the technologies such as Polkadot comes in, and of course also some other blockchain technologies. But I'm touching upon Polkadot because, like we talked before, it is a technology that acts as, let's say, an interoperable engine with other blockchains, to which, you know, we can also transfer this knowledge that comes to an existence on the decentralized knowledge graph. So overarchingly, you know, blockchain space, it has been about transactions. It has been about giving cryptocurrencies a property of an asset class. But what we try to do is we try to instill this property of an asset class into the knowledge itself. We believe that the knowledge itself is going to be essentially the key driver for human prosperity. And we want to democratize it. We want to democratize access, and we also want to democratize the value sharing that you get when you are bringing together data and the knowledge. And traditionally, big companies, Google, Microsoft, not that we have like anything against them, we're even using some of their components, because our approach is overarchingly cohesive. We don't want to be competing against anybody out there. We don't want to be competing against projects in the cryptocurrency space. We see that there is a high level of complementarity. We also have like some very cool partners from the Web3 space, but also we don't want to compete with Web2 companies. We feel that we can build bridges without being competitive against the likes of Google, the likes of Microsoft, and then bring aboard not only them, but also their user base. So for that reason, also, we do have some collaborations in place with the likes of Google and some other companies. I hope that answers your question. It's a little bit more like a 360 walk around the issue.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad we started in that direction of kind of breaking down the two components to OriginTrails, the knowledge graph and then the distributed ledger component. Even though they're one in the same in OriginTrails, you know, there are two components here. And you mentioned something about blockchains not really being great databases. So how does that work in essence? Does the knowledge graph, where is that data stored and how is that data stored? Because we're a big fan of this kind of new thing in crypto, although it's not a new thing, it's always been very relevant, which is kind of termed as DePIN, decentralized physical infrastructure. When you look at NFTs, and even if you look at how the Ethereum nodes are structured, the majority are ran on Amazon Web Services. The majority of NFTs are actually stored on Amazon. So how do you guys, not that that's necessarily a bad thing, actually store data on the knowledge graph? Is it in the form of a tokenized asset, or
It is. So the knowledge itself is stored in a form, we call them knowledge assets. Knowledge asset is a new internet primitive that we developed and launched together with the latest version of OriginTrail decentralized knowledge graph v6 in the beginning of the last year. And knowledge graph, knowledge asset is essentially composed of an NFT. And on top of the NFT, you would also have an associated knowledge graph for each NFT. So the NFT brings you the property of ownership and also the transferability of this knowledge. And of course, on top of it, the knowledge graph can be expanded and even updated. And this also very much corresponds to how the network looks like. So DKG is a two-network system. So we would still be maintaining the consensus or outsourcing consensus mechanism to the blockchain layer. And in this blockchain layer, we would have several blockchains integrated. In the past version of the network, we would have Gnosis, Ethereum, Matic. And then in the newest, the latest V6, we integrated it with Polkadot, our own parachain, which up until December was called OriginTrail parachain, but now it's being called Neuro because it does instill certain artificial intelligence kind of features onto the consensus layer itself. But at the same time, it is one of the networks that that very robustly propels the decentralized knowledge graph. So that's the blockchain layer. So DKG is multi-chain. On top of it, we have a so-called OriginTrail decentralized network. And OriginTrail decentralized network is essentially structured as a decentralized, as a knowledge graph database. With one important distinction that the knowledge graph database, so the knowledge that gets relayed onto the second layer of the network, is being replicated onto 3 nodes in the ODN. And the ODN essentially is being supported by a permissionless network. Anyone can enter that network as a node runner and can become the holder of the knowledge, and can even earn some rewards in our utility token for performing those services. So in this second layer of the network, the data is being stored in the form of knowledge graphs. And there's also one important component in order to maintain essentially you have replication, but at the same time you also store hashes, so cryptographic fingerprints on both layers, so that you can always check whether someone at the upper layer has tampered with the information contained on the node. So both layers are very important, and we feel that this cohesion has always been necessary, and that we cannot go and just jump straight onto storing data on chain, because that would be neither possible, because blockchain do not have certain database properties that you need, and it's also not scalable. Like, blockchains are not meant for data storage. So it's a perfect fit, perfect complementarity between both networks.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. So you've almost got a bit of a kind of DePIN system in-house in regards to actually storing the knowledge in a decentralized way, just in the true ethos of this entire space. And I've got so many questions I want to ask you. It's just how do I fit them in? Because I just want to maybe ask you like 5 or 6 questions right now, but I want to kind of make sure there's a structure to them. And I think one of the best places to go from here is maybe if I could ask you why the decentralization of knowledge is so important, because as I see it, I do see a bit of a techno-feudalistic world arising, where you have the big companies that essentially have, in many cases, a monopoly over things like knowledge on the internet, at least. What is the importance of actually decentralizing knowledge as a kind of overview? Because I think that's a really interesting subject we could get into.
Yeah, so I'll try to touch one specific example where humanity or collective of persons or collective of, let's say, organizations can really reach much higher optimum than they would have if knowledge remained shielded in, let's say, data lakes. I'm going to use the example from the States, where the biggest retailers over there, they got together, they formed an organization called Supplier Compliance Audit Network. So you will have Walmart, Costco, JCPenney, the biggest importers to the States, deciding to essentially exchange information amongst themselves. And mind that those organizations are actually competing against each other in a free market. But in that particular case, these organizations decided that it makes sense not to compete when it comes to safety of imports and exchange information. And in order to do so, they decided to use OriginTrail, because OriginTrail gives them this property of, at the same time, providing some cushion or providing some protection against sharing sensitive information, publicly, or even amongst parties to this consortium. So, protecting sensitive data while still being able to exchange information in a way that they all benefit from it. So information, knowledge. And in doing so, what they achieve here is they fight audit fatigue. The audit fatigue, this is about, the inspection controls on foreign factories that import to the United States. So instead of, say, Walmart having to repeat audit on the same factory where Costco or Home Depot has already done it in Asia, they would instead exchange information so that they would reach certain efficiencies. At the same time, they would also achieve, safety, product safety when it comes to import of products. So this is one such instance where organizations achieve much higher optimum by being able to, let's say, democratize information exchange in a small circle of organizations. Now, if we kind of repeat the same exercise at the human level, so that anyone can exchange information freely without, having to be afraid that this information will be stolen from him in a way or exploited as an IP that he or she would have lost, then we can, as a society, achieve much, much higher optimum. And right now, we're kind of picturing this as a theoretical example, but already now you're able to essentially go on X and mine new knowledge on a decentralized knowledge graph. We actually launched knowledge mining for, first off, to start off with a category of art. So essentially, you're able to upload your whatever art you have, digital or even physical art, on X platform, and essentially write a command of so ChatDKG, we use that bot on Twitter, and you can essentially already mine the new knowledge representing your physical art. And what that does for you as an artist, say, it does, you provide this claim to fame that this is your art. And whoever is going to create, let's say, a generated new derivative from that art can always show and point to the lineage of the original art that you've created. So this is also an example where individuals, artists, can get involved in the DKG and provide protection for their art, protect their IP in a way. So same exercise will be repeated in the decentralized science space, where researchers are going to be able to enshrine knowledge from their research onto the DKG, make it available for AI systems to pull information from it. So we call that RAG. It's a retrieval. It's short for retrieval augmented generation. And essentially, you do still apply generative AI at the end of the day, but you're always able to verify what's the lineage of information that you use to train your AI model. So again, OriginTrail, or the tracking the information of knowledge that you're using when you're using AI. So all of these things. So if we can somehow free up more information, more knowledge, give people tools to essentially reap benefits in a much more democratic way, this is how we believe that we will reach much higher optimum as a society, as opposed to just, you know, shielding information and appropriating it in the hands of like massively big companies.
Yep, no, absolutely. And there's something I also want to ask you about actually storing data. We'd spoke about storing data via DNA. I mean, could you imagine if from the start of humanity, we had a way of storing data and verifying it throughout the ages? I mean, we right now, who knows where we would be as a species? But before we go into maybe storing data in DNA, the kind of way I really look at OriginTrails is as a source of truth, a source of provenance, a source of verifiability for data. You know, Bitcoin, to use Bitcoin as an example again, gives people a source of provenance in regards to where that Bitcoins came from. And it's just a database of basically, well, not a database, it's basically a ledger of how to track things. And that's why we trust it. The same thing here is really being applied to knowledge. And the interesting thing, although you're not, as you say, necessarily trying to compete with Google, perhaps more complement it and offer an alternative in regards to data. The really interesting for me is right now you really have Google as the source of truth, you know, and they have their own knowledge graph, which of course is centralized, where if you guys are coming along and you're offering an alternative, just like Bitcoin coming along and offering alternative money to knowledge in a secure and verifiable way. And I absolutely love this. I mean, some of the stuff that you just mentioned there is brilliant. If I have a theory on something, I can make that into a knowledge asset that can be then tracked back to me. And you can say, okay, well, when did you come up with this theory? Well, actually, your knowledge asset was after my knowledge asset. So, you know, there's the world of possibilities is absolutely endless with this. And I do see you guys as a real force of good, a real kind of evolution of knowledge and how we verify it and trust it. How could we spoke a little bit off camera, and we've spoken about it twice off camera now, and I kind of want to bring it on camera. What can you do in terms of storing this knowledge, perhaps in the real world? We'd mentioned doing it via DNA. Can we expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. If you just look into the history, it's a very broad topic, because I think you also need to look into the history of how knowledge was produced. And you also mentioned that back in the days, plenty of knowledge disappeared. That's why we don't know exactly how pyramids were built, etc. So previous civilizations, they had this spectacular knowledge, which they really, you know, it was not maintained up until you know, the first clay writings were made and then discovered. And even those clay writings, I'm sure that many of them got lost. So previous civilization already produced a vast amount of knowledge, which we will likely never discover. And then in the Dark Ages, pretty much all the knowledge was maintained by monks in monasteries, making transcriptions, and pretty much we had this knowledge scarcity because of that, up until Gutenberg developed the printing press. And this is when the knowledge started to proliferate much faster, because we were able to print books, and you know, this gap of knowledge somehow got filled in by the books, which was very positive. Then came internet, and internet brought connectivity. I'm saying connectivity also because one of our advisors, Bob Metcalf, he's also a formulator of the law of network effects. And connectivity essentially allows, you know, the internet as a driver of connectivity allows us to connect, allows us to share even more information, even more faster. So we completely annihilated the problem of information scarcity with the internet. But this is when, you know, a new problem started to become much more apparent, which is a problem of trust. How can we be sure that you are, you know, what you pretend to be, or the information, the attestations that you're presenting? So we have this information redundancy, but we have this attention fatigue. We don't know, you know, which information to trust, and we have this trust deficit. So now knowledge perhaps has another role to play. So how can we track knowledge? Who's the producer of that knowledge? And also, still, how can we connect knowledge? Like you said, you can have conflicting statements, but still, it makes sense to present both conflicting statements for, you know, the variety of researchers, variety of public entities to decide what is true and what isn't. So we also need to fight censorship. So in this day and age, we have much more problems than we have solutions. And I guess one of the principles that we can apply here is we should make knowledge as freely available as possible. There's a saying, knowledge is power, but knowledge shared is power multiplied. So we need to somehow break the shackles for knowledge, essentially to reach the people, for people to be able to then to, you know, educated people to decide what is a true representation of the real world. And in a way, we should get more people involved in producing and also gaining value from the knowledge economy that will now explode. So we're at the intersection of a very, very fast knowledge creation, but at the same time, the knowledge creation can be conducted in a centralized way or in a decentralized way. Now we believe that, let's say in the field of academia or decentralized science, it's still a very centralized arena here. So you would have companies, you would have countries, you would have like European Union financing vast amounts of knowledge. But the problem is it is all done at the expense of researchers. They're not getting a fair cut when they're producing knowledge. It's pretty much editorials with journals, which are, you know, monopolizing the knowledge that they did not produce, and they reap benefits from it. So going again from the problem of scarcity of information, and then to abundance of information, and then again to the problem of us not being able to, I guess, equally participate in the knowledge problem. I think technologies, I'm not just gonna, you know, say praises to the decentralized knowledge graph, also oracles, also, you know, the blockchain layers that we see are being built right now. I think these are all substrates on which a new society can be built. But I guess also here, how we approach the applications with Web3, I think we should all, especially us in Web3, approach things with a grain of salt. I think with those protagonists within the Web3 world, we kind of tend to believe that we can subversively work against the big monopolies. Whereas I believe that we should also, like, I guess, offer bridges to the Web2 companies to start using Web3 technologies, and start using Web3 technologies in a way that they hook in their user base. And when their user base is absolutely convinced that Web3 technologies make sense, I think this complementarity between Web2 and Web3 technologies will simply morph into a perfect cohesion, whereby it's going to be an indistinguishable feature or features between both worlds, and we will transition into a much more, I guess, fair society where knowledge is being produced and also maintained in a more democratic way. Again, a very 360 walk around why I feel kind of the knowledge graph, the ability of being able to share knowledge, to reap benefits from knowledge is important, not just for the organizations, but also for individuals, researchers. And it's, you know, we touched upon Polkadot before. I think in the Web3 space, we should also somehow break the barriers of this, how is it called? The tribalism.
Tribalism,
yeah. So I think everybody just, you know, says praises to their coins, whereas we don't feel that this should be the case, where like we can all reach a much higher optimum within the Web3 space if we build interoperable solutions, if we get rid of the tribalism. And that actually got us into to the Polkadot ecosystem, which somehow fosters, I would say, collaboration much more than any other blockchain ecosystem. Perhaps also because of its foundry that stems from Ethereum, and then they also attempted to build an interoperable engine. And this is where we also kind of feel at home, and that's why we also deployed our own L1 on Polkadot called Neuro. And we feel that, you know, this approach will also allow us to connect to other chains, not only within the Polkadot ecosystem, but also outside, when the bridge is mature, when the technology also gets other technologies get closer to Polkadot.
Yeah, if you look at Electric Capital did a recent report on developers. Now, developers are fundamental to a Web3 project, because just like with the internet, without the developers, things didn't get built that people come on and use, and they're a good kind of indicator of or can be a good indicator of value. And actually, they did a report on interconnectivity between blockchains from a developer point of view, and Polkadot was second to Ethereum. If you look at the connectivity of Ethereum, it's obviously the biggest. It's the one that's been around the longest. It's got the most developers. Polkadot was literally secondary to it out of pretty much all the blockchains. And there's actually value in interconnectivity. There's value in everything in life. Sometimes we just don't attach a monetary value to it. Although, as Metcalfe's law, kind of looks at network and value can be derived from that. I think Polkadot is doing something truly special. And, I'm super happy you guys are building on top of it. And to come back to sort of knowledge and the kind of history of it and where we're at today with this abundance of knowledge on the internet and how it's made things really inclusive, one of my favorite sayings out there is that it's not what people know, it's what they know that ain't so that's the problem. And this, I think, is where technology like OriginTrails is stepping in, because you can now go back and see the lineage of this data. You can see the linkage of this data. And this fundamentally changes everything. And I want to come on to AI systems. We've touched on it briefly, and deep fakes and things like this. And with the election year coming up, this stuff's going to be very interesting, because anyone could put anything on the internet right now. And you can't really verify it and sort of be able to distinguish kind of what's true from what's not in many cases. But before I do that, quick question is, how are you guys right now? And there's probably various ways that you guys are pulling together data to put on the graph. How would you summarize how you guys are getting the data?
Yep. So before launching the knowledge mining, using DKG was predominantly an enterprise play, which suited us well, since we came from the enterprise background, and we also initially deployed solutions for the supply chain sector. So the vast amount of data still up until this date is being shared into the decentralized knowledge graph by the enterprises from many directions, from construction, from supply chains, pharmaceuticals, transportation, railway sector. So we have companies such as Swiss Federal Railways using DKG to exchange information. Essentially, they're suppliers of spare parts such as Siemens, and the big ones, making sure that the railway system is smarter as well as safer. So this is one such example. So you would have companies essentially that would still contribute the predominant amount of information contained within this decentralized knowledge graph. And how they do it, we also build a layer of proprietary technologies that are needed for enterprises to actually interface with the DKG. One such technology is called network operating system. In a nutshell, network operating system is used by the companies to essentially relay knowledge assets onto the decentralized knowledge graph without having to worry about the crypto complexities. So we, the core development company, Trace Labs, would maintain this proprietary piece of technology called network operating system, and we would take care of all the complexities crypto related, and they would simply care about things that they get out of the system, the value they get out of the system, and they would pay subscription fees essentially to run their applications on top of the DKG. And this still acts as a middleware. So then their applications, be it SAP, be it legacy systems, could retrieve information out of the DKG, even via email. So we kind of positioned the DKG as a middleware. We didn't want to rip and replace the existing legacy systems. And perhaps this is also one of the reasons why we believe that we cannot just simply forgo everything that has, that is in existence in the world, the legacy, but simply we should perhaps as a Web3 act as a middleware. So essentially, long story short, it's the enterprises currently, and now with the advent of so-called knowledge mining, and to a similar extent as mining Bitcoin, knowledge can be mined, knowledge assets can be mined on the OriginTrail network. Participants from all walks of life, from art,
Twitter
from
was an
decentralized
example.
science,
Yeah.
can start minting, can start generating assets, and then even earn rewards from the token that exists on Polkadot parachain. It's called Muro. And yeah, this gives us much more. This provides much more vectors for the growth of the knowledge graph, but also provides a very innovative way to signal what is a useful knowledge. And right now we're in the so-called, so the latest development phase, we named it after Bob Metcalfe. It's called Metcalfe phase. And right now we are in the first stroke of this phase. It's called Genesis phase. And in this Genesis phase, our aim is to essentially generate Genesis knowledge from all different categories that you can possibly imagine. And then using the knowledge mining mechanism, we would like to signal which of this Genesis knowledge is actually most meaningful, most useful, most quality, because in the future, we will see new knowledge appear on the DKG, which will be linked to the Genesis knowledge. And this is how also miners of the Genesis knowledge will be able to accrue rewards based on how useful their knowledge is. So it's an innovative approach. And right now, so we're kind of slowly transitioning from having only companies, only enterprises relaying information onto the DKG to having anyone use the DKG. And you even have a so-called very interesting application. It's called Chat DKG.
Yep.
So you're now able to chat with the network by, let's say, going on to Twitter, and you can again prompt Chat DKG and ask a question about, say, how do Polkadot and OriginTrail drive transparency and artificial intelligence, and bam, you would get a response back to Twitter, to X platform. And again, it's all being done by essentially using the RAG system, so the retrieval augmented generation, and then you would get a summary as a response back on the Twitter. So this is how we kind of make it more seamless, not only for the knowledge to appear on the network, but for anyone to essentially query the knowledge and gets to know what exists on a decentralized knowledge graph, even to an extent that now some of the enterprises, one such particular instance is a producer of food products. They would want to feature a product, an application built on DKG in a TV commercial. So you'd be able to scan a code and then go to the application, which is clearly powered by the DKG, and ask questions about their products. And same would be done in supermarkets, say. So you as a consumer would scan a product, and then you'd be immediately transferred to the application powered by the DKG. So I think we have reached a level of, I would say, seamless use for anyone, for retail, within the retail space, so that in a way, Web3, or at least a small portion of the Web3 technologies can really knock on many homes and get itself introduced in a very kind of cool form.
An organic form as well, I think. I think with Web3, people try and reinvent the wheel a lot of times, when actually the wheel kind of worked. In the Web2 space, it just could do with perhaps different kind of tires being put on it. So it's all fascinating stuff, and you've touched on the kind of chat side of things, and that kind of brings us on to AI. And actually, you had mentioned that AI hallucinates. Now, I know this firsthand. I use ChatGPT all the time. And I've sent a few emails on ChatGPT before and stupidly not actually read what I was sending, and had responses back like, I'm sorry, this makes no sense, So you guys can kind of, I guess, step in. And when I've read the email, it hasn't made any sense. I didn't even know what had really came out of it, my own fault. You guys are kind of applying verifiable knowledge, which gives these AI systems provenance. Now, I've listened to a lot of podcasts, read a lot of books on AI. One of the main issues that people continue to come up with is the lack of provenance with the data that's inputted into these AI systems. You guys are effectively solving that problem. Can we talk a little bit about
that? Yeah. So again, the same core primitives that we developed, such as knowledge assets, can be used to to essentially be retrieved by such generative AI systems, and then provide you with a summary, or like the answer as a summary. But then, in a case of just merely using OpenAI, you're not able to verify anything. You should like blindly trust it, or go and do your research all over again from scratch, basically. Now, in the case of the DKG, and you can even test it out. You can go to OriginTrail World website, or you can test it on Twitter. There's a profile called Chat DKG. You can follow it. And then there you also have instructions how to use an OpenAI-like interface for asking questions about the knowledge assets that exist on the DKG. Now, there is one caveat. Obviously, the system would tell you if the DKG does not contain knowledge, information about the topics that you're interested in. So that's kind of a limitation. But of course, this limitation is being annihilated slowly but surely in the future, when we're adding more and more knowledge base to the system, knowledge assets. But essentially, when you're asking ChatDKG, a question, you get a very nicely summarized answer. It looks like ChatGPT, but there is one important distinction. You're always able to click on all the knowledge assets listed there, all the knowledge assets that were used to produce the answer that you're reading, and you can go all the way to the source, seeing on chain, on parachain, who issued the knowledge asset, when it was updated. You can see the knowledge graph, so you can see all the the linked data existing in the knowledge asset. And this is really kind of this is really where people kind of experience this serendipitous moment, and they really understand why information provenance is important nowadays. Now, information provenance, so this caveat here, I think it's very important. Information provenance does not equal truth. So you should always, apply grain of salt. You should always apply, your analytical capabilities to analyze whether or not, certain knowledge asset is an actual representation of truth. But still, being able to trace back information to its source, to its originator, that's a huge deal. And that's the leapfrog that the decentralized knowledge graph is bringing to the artificial intelligence world.
Yep, it's absolutely huge. Like I say, provenance, it doesn't equal truth. I think that's a really important distinction, because just because you can prove where something's come from doesn't mean that person the information's come from is actually the source of truth. It could be anyone, but you will get to see who that anybody is and make your own decision based on that and other kind of links that you decide to derive from it. Ziga, I had read somewhere, and you had mentioned about Walmart and companies like this and supply chains, that 40% of international trading ports in the United States currently use OriginTrails. I'm not sure whether I took that down right. Could you talk on that slightly?
Yeah, so that's the example that I touched upon briefly before. So we were fortunate enough to partner with a few very reputable companies, organizations, one such being the British Standards Institution. And with them, in 2021, I believe, we launched a white paper, joint white paper, in which we described a handful of applications that would bring massive impact to the supply chain and enterprise space in a regulatory compliance fashion, where British Standards Institution is an expert in. And we're there somewhat of an exclusive blockchain solutions provider. And with them, we developed a solution that is called Scan Trusted Factory. Scan, again the same consortium of companies that I mentioned before, importers to the States. And these organizations, in total, their imports represent 40% of the entirety of imports to the United States in terms of the dollar value, and 40% of the totality of imports are being secured by the solution called Scan Trusted Factory, which has this core underpinning, which is OriginTrail, to secure information exchange in the form of security exchanged information, company audits on over 24,000-25,000 factories, mainly from Asia.
Wow, absolutely huge. Yeah, I had to ask you about that because I did have a number of people that I'm very close with had asked me about that and said, be sure to ask that question because that's pretty huge.
Mhm.
And I think you guys are huge from so many different levels. For me, it really makes a hell of a lot of sense. I'm fully behind Origin Trails and what you guys are doing. And I'm very excited to see how 2024, 2025, and the future looks and how you guys help to shape that. I know I've taken up quite a bit of your time, Ziga, and it is greatly, greatly appreciated. The last thing, I guess, for me to kind of do, because I don't want to cram too much, we could go on for hours and hours, I'm sure, but I don't want to cram too much information into this one podcast. And I'm hopeful that we have the opportunity to interview you again. The last thing really for me to do, Ziga, is to ask people where they can find you and where they can find more about Origin Trails out at. Of course, we'll leave links to your website, your Twitter, your personal Twitter, if you're happy for us to put that up there in the description. But is there anywhere you would urge people to go to?
Yeah. Let's start offline because in a few weeks we're gonna do a small European roadshow. We're also sponsoring one of the most important supply chain events globally. It's called GS1 Summit, GS1 Week. We're their innovation sponsor, so we're gonna be in Brussels. If you happen to be in Brussels, you can meet us there, and then also, in a few weeks' time, we just got confirmed we're co-hosting a meetup with Google in Amsterdam. So
Wow.
Google is gonna kind of give us spaces, and also we're gonna kind of join. We're gonna be there with the host at their offices. So we can we're gonna share more details about that later on. You can
Brilliant.
stop by in Amsterdam and have a beer with us and chat. It's gonna be a small meetup.
Wow.
We're gonna be talking about how OriginTrail and Google, by kind of fostering this more cohesive approach, can also provide more trust to artificial intelligence. So
Yep.
that's kind of the offline events where you can catch us in the following month. Otherwise, OriginTrail.io is a very comprehensive resource of knowledge about OriginTrail. You can also then go click on the OriginTrail world, and you can chat with our network. You can ask us, or you can ask the chat DKG anything about OriginTrail, about its resources, about tutorials, how to get involved, how to build solutions on top of it. How does Polkadot drive also the consensus layer of OriginTrail? So that's the informational part. The community, OriginTrail community, is absolutely helpful. Anyone who pops up in Telegram, they help them out with the answers. They guide them through node setup. Even now, when we're introducing staking, if you are interested in staking your utility tokens, you can come into Telegram and ask any question. Just be mindful that you only follow official sources, which you see listed on the OriginTrail.io website. So Telegram, Discord, the usual suspects. Of course, Twitter, you can find me on Twitter as DREVZIGA. You can also follow OriginTrail and other associated entities to OriginTrail, such as Trace Labs, core development company, Trace Alliance, which is an educational hub of OriginTrail, and also NeuroWeb.ai, which is a parachain on Polkadot.
Yep. And we'll leave the links to all that in the description. And again, just to reiterate some comments there, make sure you're following the right people and the official sources. But we'll leave links in the description. Ziga, it's been an absolute pleasure, my friend. And like I say, hopefully we can do this again sometime soon. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I've really enjoyed every minute of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And really looking forward to do this again. Thank you.